Stans. We all know them, we all laugh at them. Whether they are making shrines to their idols, getting so obsessed with a certain cultural export that it becomes weirdly racist, or writing so many letters that even the official Doctor Who fan club thinks they're a massive nerd. There is no shortage of the kind of cringe that Stans can get up to. But I do think that the term is a bit overused. After all, Stan was a character who was so obsessed with Eminem that he murder-suicided his pregnant girlfriend when the rapper wouldn't answer his letters. There is such a thing as being too into whoever you look up to. And while this can lead to some amusing consequences, the actions of Stans can also be pretty devastating. So let's talk about Psychotic superfans. Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. But before we get started, this video is brought to you by Fume. Not all habits are bad. With Fume you can enjoy flavour and fidgetability with no vapour, no nicotine and no harmful chemicals. This award-winning device comes with an innovative system that doesn't rely on electronics, so no more worrying about whether your device is charged or not. Finally, something you can enjoy breathing in without the worry of harmful chemicals, ridding you of guilt and covering your taste buds with flavourful air. Fume comes with a variety of flavours, from classics such as crisp mint and orange vanilla, to more exotic selections like their sparkling grapefruit cores. Your Fume comes with a simple but robust core system, making it easy to change flavours on the fly wherever you are. Even if you're strolling down the street, you can look fashionable with your Fume with its real wood finish instead of walking around with a light up RGB fleshlight in your hand. Not only does it look beautiful, but your Fume is built with user experience in mind, with there being an adjustable airflow dial along with movable parts with magnets for all of your fidgeting needs. Don't just take it from Fume, take it from me. The added usability as a fidget toy has really helped with the tism in me. Fume has also launched their new base, which is a weighted stand for your Fume when you're not using it. Not only that, but it can also double as a fidget spinner by spinning your Fume device on the base. But it wasn't just the funny metal mechanisms that I enjoyed. I was honestly surprised at the flavours provided by Fume. Not only do they taste great, but they're a breath of fresh air, but even better when you pair that air with a hint of crisp mint. Stopping is something that we all put off because it's hard work, but switching to Fume is very easy, enjoyable and even fun. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. So, join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Head to tryfume.com/Dankula or scan the QR code on the screen and use code Dankula to get 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. So that's tryfum.com and use code Dankula to save an additional 10% off on your order. Now, most of us take part in some kind of fandom or hobby. And I'm sure that we all like to show our appreciation for the actors, musicians, writers, and any other creatives that make the stuff that we enjoy. But for some people, this appreciation can become an obsession, leading them to go to ridiculous lengths to get senpai to notice them. And more often than not, it can get very, very scary when they don't get the attention that they're looking for. After all, you all know what happened when Ricardo Lopez got a little bit too sweet on Björk. I still don't know what he saw in her. But speaking of musicians, let's start with an unfortunate incident that occurred on the 8th of December 2004. Dimebag Darrell Abbott was due to play with his new band Damage Plan at the Alrosa Villa nightclub in Columbus, Ohio, where a 25-year-old fan named Nathan Gale was waiting for them to go on stage. But something was off about Gale. Some of the other people attending the gig noticed that he was just standing outside and they were wondering why he wasn't going inside to see the show. And when he was asked about it, Gale just said, "I don't want to see no shitty local bands." The other concert goers then suggested that Gale should at least go inside to stay warm, but Gale just said he was waiting for Damageplan. So the other concert goers just left him to it instead of arguing. This didn't seem that unusual to anyone because, metal elitists are pretty common. Eventually, it was time for Damageplan to go on stage, but instead of entering the venue properly, Gale jumped a 6-foot fence and entered through a side door. Witnesses reported that he had a determined, angry look on his face as he marched in a straight line to the stage. He then pulled out a 9mm Beretta and aimed at the band while shouting something about Pantera. No one could make out exactly what he was saying because, well, it was a heavy metal show. No one could hear what anyone was saying. He was reported to have said something like, "This is for breaking up Pantera," but that has since been debunked. Since no one really heard what Gale was saying and everyone's focus was on the stage, no one noticed him in time to prevent him from shooting Dimebag Darrell in the head, with no hesitation or remorse. At first, the crowd thought that the shooting was a bit of stage magic and part of the act, and they just kept rocking out with their fists in the air. But the horror of what had just happened began to sink in when Vinnie Abbott stopped playing the drums because he saw his brother bleeding from his head on the floor of the stage. Gale was then tackled by a security guard, but he began shooting randomly into the audience, which caused everybody to freak the fuck out and turn the floor into the most hardcore mosh pit of all time as everyone was clambering all over each other to try and get to the nearest exit. An ex-soldier named Travis Burnett stepped in to try and disarm Gale, but he was shot in the arm for his trouble. And after he narrowly avoided being shot in the head, self-preservation kinda kicked in and he escaped the scene. And I can't really say I blame him. A Columbus police officer named James Niggemeyer, I am very sorry, but that's just his actual name, then arrived at the scene after receiving a 911 emergency response call. He entered the venue through the backstage, armed with a shotgun. Gale had taken drum technician John Cat Brooks as a hostage, so Niggemeyer blew Gale's face off. It was initially believed that Gale blamed Dimebag Darrell for breaking up Pantera, since he was pretty upset about it. But it was later discovered that Gale actually thought Dimebag Darrell had stolen a song written by him, which is obviously a delusion. People also thought that it might have something to do with the date, since it was the 24th anniversary of John Lennon's death, but that just so happened to be a coincidence. After this incident, very many bands stopped allowing fans to come right up to the stage, and even to this day, most artists keep a barrier between the audience and the stage, often lined with a bunch of security guards. Continuing on with the music theme, we have the most obvious showcase of absolutely mental fans. K-pop. As you will all regret to know, K-pop is absolutely massive in the West and its fandom is unbearably passionate and annoying, which all of you will know if you've ever been unfortunate enough to draw their attention on Twitter. Seriously, I was actually reluctant to include this segment in the video because of how fucking irritating those little bastards can be. But what you might not know is about the phenomenon that they have within their own community, known as a saseng fan, which means private life fan. These are essentially the final boss of K-pop stans, who like to just outright invade the private lives of whatever idol they are autistically obsessed with. So, stalking. It's just fucking stalking. But wait, it gets so much fucking worse. It really isn't uncommon for these types of fans to put their bodily fluids on or in items to then give to their targets. And unfortunately, it's a common enough occurrence that a lot of K-pop idols won't even shake hands with their fans anymore, because too many of them found a certain strange, sticky substance in the palms of their hands afterwards. It seems that a lot of guys were popping off to the toilet, having a wank, not cleaning their hand, and then going up and shaking hands with the famous person. That's rape, technically. I'm sorry, that feels rapey. It does. That just feels like outright sexual assault. Why they do that, I have no idea, and I'm not even going to try and comprehend the reasons. But on the far darker end of this kind of stalking, K-pop singers have also been known to fall foul of the saying, "If I can't have you, no one can." And it's actually so bad that it's sometimes even written into the contracts of these artists that they cannot date anyone while they are an idol. However, this is less likely for their protection and much more likely because single artists attract a lot more attention, fandom, and money. Because nutcases out there think, oh, they're single, I might have a chance, and start throwing a bunch of money at them. You know, it's the same as when a popular female Twitch streamer announces they have a boyfriend and then instantly lose half of their subs because fans are like, well then, fuck you, whore, and start cancelling all of their subs. Because, yeah, big guy, you totally had a shot with Amaranth. I mean, you were so close, man. You were just, maybe if you go up a tier. I mean, she'll notice you one day, I promise. One day, you totally could fuck Amaranth. The K-pop community is also very well acquainted with what they call antis, or anti-fans, who are essentially hate followers. You know, like 60% of my Twitter mentions. In 2006, one young hate follower actually poisoned an artist named Jung Young-ho, also known as Yuno from the pop group TVXQ. She handed him a drink that he assumed was orange juice from one of the venue staff, and Yuno took a big swig. I know this is already a massive security fail, but it seemed like an innocent situation, and East Asia is still a high-trust society pending enrichment. So you can't really blame him for not thinking that something was off. Yuno soon began to feel sick. He struggled to breathe and he was coughing up blood. The hate fan had actually poisoned him with super glue in an attempt to kill him, simply because she didn't like him or his fan base, or she preferred another artist over him. These kinds of crazy people can create rivalries in their heads between their favoured idol and the target of their hatred. Fortunately, Yuno made a full recovery over time, but for some reason, he actually forgave the girl that had poisoned him and didn't press charges. He didn't want to ruin the young anti-fan's life with prison because she was young. I mean, maybe not jail, but definitely an asylum. Now this next one is a little bit grim. It isn't an attempt on anyone's life or anything like that, but it just shows how sick and disturbing some interactions with these fans can actually be. One obsessive fan of the idol OK Taekyeon, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, don't care enough to find out, also known as just Taekyeon from the pop group 2PM, was written a love letter by this charming female fan. One of thousands, I'm sure, that he gets every single day. Now, it's not news to say that a girl wrote a love letter to her celebrity crush. Young girls do that all the time. However, this letter declared how the girl couldn't live without her idol. And it was written in her blood. Now, the twist here comes with good news and bad news. The good news is that the girl hadn't actually hurt herself to collect her choice of ink. So, that's nice. But the bad news is that it was her period blood. And if that isn't disgusting enough, she actually decorated the letter using cuts of her pubic hair. As if she was from fucking Midsommar or something like that. And as you saw a moment ago, a picture of the letter was posted online and many people thought it was fake because who the fuck does something like that? So, the writer of the letter responded with a picture of their bloody period pad to prove that it was in fact real. Why would you publicly own up to something like that? But sometimes the big declarations of love actually work. In a 1 in a million shot, one obsessed fan managed to score a date with the man of her dreams. In 2009, when all the girls were creaming themselves over Robert Pattinson, he was playing the Batman in Twilight New Moon. While shooting in Spain, Pattinson noticed that there was something in the way every time he went back to his apartment. A girl. For weeks, she stood outside of his building all day, every day because she was kind of obsessed with him. So Pattinson decided to do something about it and take her on a date. However, it wasn't the kind of date that she was expecting. The girl took Pattinson to her parents' restaurant, and while they wined and dined, they didn't get around to the rest of it. You see, Pattinson had a plan. She had violated his privacy for weeks, so now Pattinson was going to have a bit of me time, whether she liked it or not. So, for the next 2 hours, Pattinson just ranted to the girl about all of the problems in his life without letting her get a word in edgeways. Treating her like a therapist and just absolutely trauma dumping so hard that he left with a blue tinge in his hair. And believe it or not, there is actual footage of her reaction to this absolute Chad move.
No! This is not how this was supposed to go! I had it all planned out!
The next day, Pattinson headed out to work and noticed that the girl was gone. She stopped hanging around outside the building and didn't reach out for a second date. He never saw her again. It turns out that there are some perks to scaring away the hoes. Speaking of heartthrobs from early 2010's cringe, Justin Bieber. Say what you will about his music, but you can't deny that he is pretty fucking famous among the normies of the world, even to this day. Well, just like any star with millions of fans, there will inevitably be a number of absolutely psychotic bad eggs. One 35-year-old fan named Dana Martin had developed an obsession with Justin Bieber and started writing him letters, but of course he never got a reply. Not just because Bieber would have been getting a literal dump truck of fan mail every single day, but also because Martin was an inmate in the southern New Mexico correctional facility. Now, being in prison suggests that Martin might not be the most reasonable of individuals, so his obsessive love naturally turned into obsessive hatred. But Martin was not only feeling jilted, but he also didn't like the direction that Bieber's career was going in. So he talked to two men on the outside, 41-year-old Mark Stake and his 23-year-old nephew, Tanner Ruin, and he enlisted their help in kidnapping Justin Bieber during a gig at Madison Square Garden, killing him and then cutting off his balls with some garden shears. All because his weird letters were never getting answered and Bieber had the audacity to grow up. But I suppose there's some kind of logic in that, considering the prevalence of the castrati in the 18th century and certain rumours about Michael Jackson, the likely symbolism of the intended post-murder castration is pretty obvious, if you ask me. Of course, however, this entire plan was organised over the prison phone, which is always monitored, so the two men were arrested for the plot. But the astounding stupidity of doing that over the prison phone isn't the part we want to focus on here. The part we want to focus on is the fact that this clearly mentally unwell fucking nutter who's in prison phoned up these two guys from prison and said, "We're going to kill Justin Bieber and cut his balls off." And these two fucking morons went, "I'm down." They were, look, see if your friend's in prison and he calls you and says something like that, that's when you go, okay, we're just not going to talk to Mike for a while. Right, that's what you do. That's what, alright, he's obviously, he is not dealing with his time very well, so we're just going to break off all contact. That's the correct response to a call like that. Right, that's what you're supposed to do. Not go, we're going to chop off Justin Bieber's balls? Hell yeah, when and where? We are so back. What these guys are crazier than the guy in the fucking prison. But not all superstars have such bad experiences with fans. Our next anecdote was certainly shocking and unnerving at the time, but it's far more funny than any of the other obsessive fan stories, especially because of who told it. He even began his account by saying, "I know it sounds funny, but it was horrifying." In 2011, Nicolas Cage was woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning by a naked man standing at the end of his bed, wearing Cage's leather jacket and staring at him while eating a fudgesicle that he had casually taken from the freezer downstairs. To be fair, if you were to ask me to describe Nicolas Cage's sleep paralysis demon, yeah, that tracks. Now, most Americans with a weapon nearby would likely invoke castle doctrine on the spot, but Nicolas Cage decided to take a different approach because his son was asleep in the next room. And one of the first rules of gun safety is not just knowing where your target is, but what is behind your target. And while we would all have loved for Nicolas Cage to play action hero IRL, you can't blame him for not wanting to in Bruges his own son. So instead, he just calmly talked to the guy for as long as it took to walk him out of the house and off of his property. After diffusing the situation, Cage didn't even press charges because the guy clearly had mental problems. It was really nice of Nicolas Cage to do that. From all that I've heard about him, it sounds like he really is one of the infinitesimal few genuinely nice guys in Hollywood. Just another funny one that also happened to Nicolas Cage. He was once stalked by a mime. A mime had managed to gain access to a studio set that Nicolas Cage was working on, and it just kind of stared at him. Like, no one thought to question the mime. The mime just managed to waltz right onto the movie set, presumably because he was all painted up and dressed up and everything, that the staff must have just thought, oh, he's obviously here for a shoot or something. So they just let him pass. And then one day, the mime was just gone and was never seen again. And this entire fucking situation of who the fuck this guy was never explained to Nicolas Cage. Nobody knew who the mime was. Now that I think about it, this one's actually kind of fucking terrifying. On rare occasions, obsessive fans don't have any malicious intent and simply just have such a strong admiration for someone or a family that they just want to be around them or step into their shoes without harming them. A man named Michael Fagan had a great appreciation for the British royal family, especially for Queen Elizabeth II. So, in his mind, he had to immerse himself into their life, meaning he needed to gain entry to Buckingham Palace. Now, you would think that one of the most protected families in the world would have so much security that you wouldn't be able to set foot on the grounds without someone knowing about it. But Michael managed to cross the grounds and gain entry to the royal palace not once, but twice. On the first occasion, Michael climbed up a drain pipe and was quickly caught by one of the housemaids, who ran away scared and alerted the guards. When they arrived, Michael was gone, and they decided to not conduct a search because they seemed to think that the housemaid had seen a ghost or something. Michael hadn't left the premises, however. He had found another way in through a window on the roof that had been left unlocked, and to dampen the sounds of his steps, he took off his shoes and socks, which were reportedly returned to him 2 years later. Michael then wandered around the palace eating cheese and crackers and tripping 3 alarms, and despite reports of a trespasser, the police thought nothing of the alarms and just silenced them, believing that they were just tripped by a faulty trigger. Since he had the run of the place, Michael sat on a throne and looked at the royal portraits, taking in the atmosphere and generally just having a grand old time with no care about being caught. He then got tuckered out after washing down his cheese and crackers with half a bottle of white wine, so he just casually left the palace and went home. After the rush he had gotten from the first break-in, Michael felt like just taking a second trip out to the palace. At 7 o'clock in the morning on the 9th of July 1982, he climbed up the palace's 14-foot wall and over the barbed wire. Then he climbed up a drain pipe and once again the alarms were all silenced because they assumed it must have been a faulty trigger again. As someone who used to work in security, I want to smash that guard's face in. Just constantly pulling a "must have been the wind" and silencing all of the alarms. This isn't some nightclub or building site with some copper wire. This is the fucking Queen. Do your job. Unimpeded, Michael made his way through the corridors until he ended up in the residential wing of the palace, where the royal apartments are located. After entering a few doors, he came into a room with a 4-poster bed with the curtains closed. Perhaps out of curiosity, or more likely stupidity, Michael opened the curtains to find none other than Big Lizzie, her Madge, Queen Elizabeth II herself, in bed. She instantly woke up, and upon seeing a strange random peasant standing over her, she was absolutely terrified. So she used her bedside alarm to call security. However, as we have already established, someone on the security team was in desperate need of firing, because no one showed up. The Queen's own personal bedside panic alarm, and no one showed up. So the Queen had to take matters into her own hands by leaving the room and calling one of the housemaids to go and get some help. The Queen's footman, Paul Wybrew, then showed up with 2 police officers to arrest Michael. Now, you would think that Michael would have been royally screwed after scaring Her Majesty like that, but in the end he just had to stay at a psychiatric hospital for 3 months after undergoing an evaluation. Michael wasn't charged for his nocturnal wanderings because trespassing in the Queen's bedroom was somehow a civil offence rather than a criminal one. But he was charged for the theft of the white wine. But that was dropped after he was sectioned. In the wake of the police royally botching the situation, the Home Secretary at the time offered to fall on his sword, but Margaret Thatcher wouldn't let him. These kinds of stories are funny though. Like, I love weird behaviour that has absolutely no malice in it. Just some guy eating cheese and crackers, standing next to the bed, saying, "Good morning, Starshine," to the fucking Queen. I mean, she had every right to be terrified, but that's still pretty funny. In a less whimsical turn, Keira Knightley of the Phantom Menace fame had a 50-year-old stalker named Mark Revell. But he didn't do the normal stalker stuff of simply following her around or spamming her with letters and calls. Instead, what he would do is show up at her house at all hours of the day and night and meow through her letterbox. Like, that's not funny. Like, I understand how that would be absolutely terrifying for any woman to go through. like, picture you're lying in bed at like 3 o'clock in the morning and all you hear is meow. I'm sorry. That's not funny. And he even did this despite Keira Knightley having a restraining order against him. Revell would also bring chalk with him and draw arrows pointing to her front door, which I'm sure only made sense to him. But maybe it was some kind of sick symbolism showing Knightley that he knew where she lived. Who knows? Like, crazy's really hard to decipher sometimes. He also sent her threatening messages on Twitter under the name of Mark McCatopus. That's not funny. While most celebrities have likely already had a bunch of threatening messages sent to them, the fact that Revell knew where Keira Knightley lived and also was sending her CP made her fear for her and her daughter's safety. The cat theme was very, very consistent through all of Mark's stalking because he also posted a USB through her door with a handwritten note that said, "Listen to my music." The USB contained multiple cat-themed songs with titles like Fuzzy Kitten Waltz. Like, it's so funny, but it's also so fucking sinister at the same time. Revell was reported to the police and subsequently arrested, and a check of his devices quickly uncovered evidence of the indecent images and threats to Keira Knightley and her husband, which landed him an 8-week suspended sentence and an indefinite sectioning for paranoid schizophrenia. Of course, this was far from the only case of social media being a conduit for fucked up encounters between celebrities and fans. YouTube and other forms of social media are rife with parasocial relationships. I'm very lucky to not have experienced anything too mental. I mean, I did have an incident where I was doing a show and I was pissing at the urinal and a guy came up to use the urinal next to me and was like, "Oh, Count Dankula." And he just stared at my dick like the entire time. Like, even when I looked at him and caught him looking, didn't break his gaze. Just didn't break his gaze. And then he said something that I'm not going to repeat, and then he just left. So, you know, I might have been in danger, actually. Think about it. So not too crazy, but that's probably going to live with me for the rest of my life. But some others, sorry, that was a fucked up story, but some others aren't so fortunate. When a media personality becomes so popular to the point where most people know who you're referring to, for example, PewDiePie, it isn't uncommon for those people to have fans showing up to their houses at all hours of the day and night just to see them. Or worse. YouTube power couple Meg Turney and Gavin Free of the Slow Mo Guys also had a run-in with an unwanted visitor. An obsessive fan of Meg's by the name of Christopher Giles broke into their Texas home at 3:40 a.m. on the 26th of January 2018, armed with a handgun and a plot to kill Gavin out of jealousy. Fortunately, however, he was not able to find the couple because they hid in a wardrobe. Imagine living in Texas, having your home invaded, and not gleefully invoking castle doctrine immediately. Eventually, Giles gave up and he returned to his car, while Gavin and Meg called 911. If you ask me, that whole breaking and entering business seems like a lot of unnecessary trouble. If Giles was so committed to being a fucking degenerate and really wanted to see Turney in her boudoir, all he had to do was pay $25. But I digress. He fucked around, so it was time for him to find out. It didn't take too long for Austin police to show up, and Giles fired his weapon in the confrontation. So the cops returned fire. When the cops got to Giles' car, he was dead. While the medical examiner has not released a report confirming whether the killing shot was from an officer or self-inflicted, either way, I'm assuming that the guy went down in slow motion. So, yeah, that was terrible. You know what? I take that back. That was bad. That was awful. I'm sorry. But while a life was lost during this event, no one innocent was harmed. But unfortunately, things don't always work out that way. And there was another particular incident that shook every YouTuber to the core. I'm sure that you all know the story of Christina Grimmie, but for those of you that don't, she was a 22-year-old singer and YouTuber who was really quite successful on the platform, and she was starting to enter the mainstream after coming third on the TV show The Voice in 2014. Kevin James Loibel spent almost every waking moment watching her content and following updates on her social media accounts, even though he didn't have any accounts himself. He was so obsessed with Grimmie that he was determined to start a relationship with her. And he even set out to put the work in. He lost weight, had a hair transplant, had laser eye surgery, and he even got his teeth whitened in an attempt to make himself more attractive to the singer before meeting her. He was so convinced that his plan would work that he would get really angry and defensive whenever anyone pointed out the obvious that he was chasing a pipe dream. But of course, any notions of developing a relationship were pure fantasy, and Loibel eventually developed a mindset of, if I can't have you, no one can. So, armed with 2 handguns and a hunting knife, he travelled to Orlando, Florida, where Grimmie was doing a show and meeting with fans afterwards on the 10th of June 2016. When Loibel got to the front of the queue and Grimmie went in for a hug, he fired 3 times, hitting her in the head and torso before being tackled by her brother Marcus. Soon afterwards, Loibel shot himself. In the wake of the shooting, practically the entire YouTube ecosystem went to DEFCON 1 as niche internet micro-celebrities everywhere realised that the platform had gotten so big and they were now so famous that they themselves could be John Lennon'd at any moment. I know that I'm bringing this video to an end on a bit of a down note, But it really does need to be stressed that celebrities are human beings and you shouldn't put them on a pedestal. There is absolutely nothing wrong with getting excited about meeting your heroes. Like, for example, if I ever bump into David Attenborough, I will fanboy the fuck out. I don't care. I say that without apology. I will fanboy the fuck out. Though, the man's in his 90s and I don't think I've got long left to meet him, and when he passes I will genuinely be absolutely fucking inconsolable, but point being, we all get a bit starstruck sometimes. But it's just so easy to just not fucking do any of the shit that I've covered in this video. I'm very fortunate where I'm enough of an ugly bastard that I'm not going to get psycho women trying to kill me after I ignore their letters. But if you ever do see me while I'm out and about and you want to say hi and take a selfie, that's absolutely fine, unless I'm eating. Please don't do it while I'm eating, but outside of that, absolutely fine, I don't mind that at all. But while I know that it's probably a bit too much to ask of some of you, for the love of God, please, just don't be fucking weird about it.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody just subscribe.